Hey, what's up, you guys? It's Tyler from the Harringtons, and we're back today with a brand new video. The video we have for you today is a replay from a Facebook Live that we did, and in this Facebook Live, we talk all about contracts, the importance of contracts, and we give you 3 tips that we wish we knew about contracts when we were first getting started in finding them and making our own, as well as a bunch of resources that you guys can go check out for getting contracts from good, reputable sources. So we're going to link all those different resources we talk about in the video down in the description below, so make sure you check those out. And if you have any questions, as always, please feel free to leave them in the comments of this YouTube video, and we will answer them as best as we can. Thanks so much, and enjoy this replay.
But before we get started, I'm sure that you guys know this if you know us. Ty and I are not lawyers. Like, we're not
lawyers.
Whatever.
I'll translate. We're not lawyers.
Whatever. We're not. We are simply going to be speaking from our experience and the things that we've learned over the past 5 years working together and running a business together, and the legal advice that we've gotten from our own lawyers. So we're going to be talking in that realm. So I don't want you to be like, oh my gosh, Tyler and Ashley said do X, Y, and Z. Okay. Like, yeah, you should still do it, but yeah.
And just like when we talked about taxes, a lot of this stuff is going to fluctuate depending on what state you live in, if you live in a different country, all that kind of stuff. So take everything we say with a slight grain of salt, and just remember that it could fluctuate depending on where you live.
Right.
But most of the stuff we're trying to say is more broadly recognized and not so specific. Right, Ash?
Right. Yeah. All right.
Perfect.
Let's transition.
Okay. Go, Ash, go.
Transition. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to talk about, when you go to, so if you use a client management software, you're probably getting your inquiry is coming in through your client management software contact form that's probably plugged into your website. And so then all that information as far as their wedding date, their venue, all those type of things is probably coming straight from your client management software inquiry page, your contact page. Okay, so the first thing that I would suggest is that you get your client's initials on those specific things. So where their venue is, like the location and addresses, you want to have them initial beside their wedding date, and then you're going to have them initial by like when the wedding is actually starting. Okay, so transition, flip the page. So this is what that looks like for us. So this is what we have. I always have them write out their wedding date by actual words and not numbers. I can't tell you, probably 3 times I've gotten an inquiry, and it's come in with the client's birth date. That's so random. It's kind of funny to me, but like you just never know. Things like that happen. Or the date, like 2008, but it's 2018. But whatever they put in is what is going to come through our client management software, and that's going to plug right into their contract. So if I'm not paying attention to it, I might not change it. Or if they're getting married on September 8th, 2018, and they accidentally type it, like, you know, the date, month, year. So they have like 08/09/18. That looks like August 9th. So I know this is like super simple, and you're probably like, well, that's dumb. I know that. But I'm telling you, it'll save you in the long run.
So obviously we're like collecting this information regardless, but having them initial next to it is sort of just like a double check for them to make sure that we're like, they're guaranteeing that they've double checked this information and that it's not accidentally incorrect, like Ash was saying. Because again, the worst thing that could happen would be someone fills in the wrong wedding date, or they had the wrong Saturday or whatever, and then we end up either double booking, or they change it, or they're like, oh no, we actually were the weekend before and now we have another wedding booked, or whatever. So this is just like a foolproof method for us that we've found to be able to double check to make sure that they're being accurate with the information that they're putting into the contract. So having them initial anywhere that you want to make sure for sure that they saw and read, because we all know that people don't always read contracts all the way through.
Yeah. Okay, so you want to get their initials on that. Very important. Very important. Okay. The next thing is a model release. So Ty and I were in the photo world for a long time before we did photo and video for a long time, and then solely went to doing video. So a model release seems very typical when you're in the photo world. So when we transitioned, we didn't really think like, oh yeah, we need a model release for video. But you do. So make sure that your contract has a model release in it. So you're basically saying like, you are allowed to use the image of the client in any type of promotional thing. You're allowed to like share their film on your website, on Facebook, on social media. Your client is giving you the right to do so. The other important part of this is that you also want to make sure that your model release includes a section that says they are also releasing you of any type of, anything that would relate to someone attending their wedding and showing up in your film. So for example, if somebody is like super famous or, I don't know, they just don't want to be online or something like that, that person can't come after you and be like, no, you have to take this film down because I showed up in their film. Your client is basically signing saying they're freeing you up from that. You're not gonna be like held under fire about anything. Your client is taking it on and saying like, no, I'm giving you the right to show anyone that's at my wedding day in my wedding film. Okay, this is another section that we always get our clients to initial buy. Just like Ty said, if you're anything like us, we don't always read contracts all the way through because they're long and like whatever, So this is another section that we have our clients initial buy just so that we can ensure that they know that they are, that we can use their film for promotional purposes and that other people at their wedding can show up in the film and that we can post it online. So that's model releases. Okay, so the last little tip is that you want both partners to sign the contract. So I think for a lot of people, when you are in the wedding world, you're working predominantly with the bride per se, especially if you have a wedding planner on board. The bride and the wedding planner probably communicate with each other a lot. So a lot of the communication is probably going between you, maybe the wedding planner, and the bride. And so I don't know why it's like that. Like, I don't know why the groom kind of just becomes removed and, the bride and is just like, taking over everything. I guess it's just like personality differences. I have no idea. But we think it's super important to have both the bride and the groom on the contract. We want them to like understand like the timeline and what they're all agreeing to and kind of like what type of relationship we're like entering into as far as like what does this contract actually mean and like what are they legally bound to, what are we legally bound to. So it's important to get both partners on the contract. So even if anything happened, like at the end of your whole relationship with you, you're all kind of like in it together. It's not just the bride, it's not just the groom, it's not like you and the parent, it's you got like whoever is on your team for your business and the couple. So it's important to get both of them to sign the contract.
Yeah, and a lot of times we'll have parents, if parents pay, they think that they need to be the one who sign, or they want to be the one who has the contract because they're the ones who are paying the money or whatever. And even in those situations, we still want to make sure that it's always just between us and the bride and groom, because at the end of the day, we're making our films for the bride and groom, and we want them to have the final say. So we get to the end, if for some reason mom doesn't like the film because it's too short or it's too cinematic or whatever, but the bride wanted that but mom didn't, technically if we have the contract with mom, we have to do whatever she says depending on what your contract says. But like that just becomes a whole complicated thing. So we want to make it so that we're only responding and we're only like legally obligated to the will and to like with the bride and the groom, not the parents, regardless of who's paying or who's like writing the checks or anything like that.
Right. So a question that we usually get about this is like, will it, like an e-signature, will that hold up in court? Like, do I have to get them to sign like a physical piece of paper saying like, yes, like I'm agreeing to this because it's in their actual handwriting? Whereas if you get them to sign online, sometimes you can just like click and it'll just like sign their name. So I asked our lawyer about this and she said, yes, that it will hold up in court. 9 times out of 10 because of the e-sign whatever Commerce Act. So yeah, that's everyone always asks that question. So yes, e-signatures are a-okay, especially if you have a client management software and you're not passing back contracts back and forth, like you're not mailing them back and forth. It like seriously such a breeze that way. Okay. So lastly, I know a lot of people are going to say, okay, so what am I going to do as far as like, where can I get a contract? Like, who should I contact? All those things.
Do I have to have a lawyer?
Right. Do I have to have a lawyer? So we will always recommend, yes, you should have a lawyer. You don't have to have one for like ever, but we always suggest, because state by state, or like if you're in a different country or something like that, everything is just different. Like the laws are different and stuff like that. And you need to be protected in your business. So we do suggest, yes, you should get a lawyer at least to look over your contract and just say like, legally this is like right and okay. But we also know that lawyers are very expensive. Ty and I have spent thousands of dollars investing into a lawyer to make sure that our contract will A, hold up in court, B, protect our clients, but also protect us. So we're going to give you some resources for where you can like go and get a contract. My favorite one to recommend is the Contract Shop. Christina Segalera is in charge of this, and she has contract templates already ready to go. She's a lawyer, and so they're like written by her, approved by her.
But they're written specifically for different fields. So
Right.
she has videography ones. If you're not a videographer or whatever, she has them specifically for X, Y, or Z.
Right.
And we're going to put all the links to these in the chat.
Yeah.
Right, Ash?
So I'm going to drop in the Contract Shop one. Another great one is the Law Tog. So she has a lot of great resources if you are like questioning about a specific thing, like limited liability or, you know, model releases. She has a lot of great things that you can look at as far as blogs and just like resources in general. She also has a podcast you can listen to. So that's the Contract Shop that I dropped, and here's the Law Tog.
So with the Contract Shop, just full disclosure, we do have like an affiliate with her where like if you sign up with that link, we get something. I don't even know what it is. But just so you guys know, we just want like open transparency. But we do, I mean, we honestly do think that it's great. It's the only reason why we like have that set up with her, just because it's really great. So one thing that you can do is you can buy these contracts from these lawyers. And obviously it's nice because they are lawyers and they made them. But if you like hiring a lawyer to make you a contract from scratch would be very, very expensive because lawyers charge by the hour, and it would obviously take them a lot longer to write you a contract from scratch than it would be for them to just edit a different contract. So I think that if you're looking, if so it's something that's interesting to you, if you don't have a really good contract right now, you're not really sure about it, I would get a contract from whatever resource that you want to get. There's other ones online. You can do Google search if you want and find other ones. We like these because they're specific for creatives. But then you can take that contract to your lawyer and they can make sure that it's specific for you and for your business and for your state and for your specific situation. And it'll be a lot cheaper for them to just kind of look it over and make small tweaks as opposed to them making you one from scratch. So that's what we did right from the very beginning.
Yeah. So we got a template and then used that before we hire a lawyer, and then had a lawyer look over it and make sure that we were all good to go.
Yeah, just to cover your bases.
Right.
But that's a lot cheaper.
Another reason why we're even really talking about this is because when you get to the point that you are full-time in your business, I know a lot of people that are on here, your filmmaking business is kind of like your side hustle. It's kind of something that you're doing on the side, and all the money that you're making with it is kind of feeding back into the business.
So it doesn't seem like very much fun to invest in a contract where you can invest in a gimbal or something.
Right.
Yeah. Or a Mavic Air.
Yeah, whatever. But when this becomes like your full-time thing and you have a family and you're trying to support your family and stuff like that, everything feels a lot weightier because you're making decisions based off like, you know, you're booking clients and like this is your livelihood. And so everything just feels more real. And so I think it's important that you run your business like a business by having a formal contract. You build out your team, like our lawyers, like on our team. I email her all the time. We've invested so much money in her, but literally it will save you in the long run, because the worst thing that could happen is something terrible could happen. Like say you get the timeline mixed up and you miss half the day and then your client sues you because you didn't show up or something like that. Like literally a nightmare. Like that would be terrible, but you have a contract in place that can help, you know, whatever in that instance. I just think it's really important.
And yeah, like she said, contracts aren't only for people who do this full time.
Right.
And it's not even just for like weddings. It should really be, you should have some sort of a written agreement at the very least for pretty much anything that you do. So even if you're just like, oh, hey, photographer down the street, yeah, I'd love to make a promo film for you, whatever, right? It's always a good idea to at least have like the general terms of like, this is how much money you're going to pay me and this is what you're going to get in return. And then at least have like an email trail at like the very, very minimum. But it's also a good idea to have a contract for something like that, and a lawyer can help you write up like a really simple contract. It doesn't need to be as complicated necessarily as like a wedding contract, just because with weddings it's hard because it's like a one-day thing and it's very, you know, obviously like a big investment, and there's lots of just like nuance to a wedding. But even with just like, again, smaller projects and things like that, it's always a good idea to have something in writing just to kind of cover yourself And again, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, it's my friend, or oh, my acquaintance. They would never sue me, or like nothing bad could ever happen, but you just never know. So it's always a good idea to at least have your bases covered. And if you do that with everybody across the board, then it's not like, oh, well, I don't trust you, so I need a contract with you, but like I trust this person, so I don't need, like, if you just do it across the board, have everybody sign contracts, it's just better for everybody, even if it's somebody that you know really well.
Yeah.
What are some common questions we get a lot about contracts as well, Ash? What was the one I was gonna ask? Oh wait, we didn't talk about how we have people sign contracts.
Oh.
Okay, wait, we have some more resources.
Okay, so we use HoneyBook. There are a lot of things out there. HoneyBook is just a client management software. There's like 17 Hats, Dusado, ShootQ, which is like really old. What were the other ones that we said?
Mm-hmm.
Tave, Waze, Wave, I don't know. Okay, so all these things are just client management.
Wait, what?
They're just client management softwares that can help you have like a template for your contract, so you don't have to like rewrite or copy and paste your contract every time. It's just already in the service, and then you can just fill in the blanks with your client's name, their venue, all those things.
Right, like the most simple way to have someone sign a contract would literally just be to have a PDF that you have. If you use Adobe Acrobat Pro, if you have the Adobe suite, you can use Acrobat Pro to like make up like, so there's boxes and stuff for them to fill in. That's like the most basic way. It's a little more complicated because you have to email it to them, then they have to download it and then fill it all out and then email it back. But that's kind of like the most free way of doing it. HoneyBook, or like some sort of a client management software, is a great option. A lot of them have things built in where you can do contracts and payments and things like that, which is one of the reasons we love HoneyBook, because it streamlines that whole process and just makes it so it's very simple. But if you aren't at the point yet where you definitely necessarily need a client management software like HoneyBook, which is an investment, there are a few other things that you can use. So pull those ones up real fast so I can read off the list, Ash.
Yeah, you can use...
So Sign Now is a good one. That's what I used when I first got started. It's just a electronic, you can just basically just sign contracts and they can sign it within the web browser thing. There's DocuSign, Agree.com also does contracts and stuff like that. So there's plenty of places that you can go that just kind of like help streamline that process, even if you're not using a full-blown client management software.
Yeah.
And then is there anything else we had on our list, Ash?
Yep. That's all the resources that we have as far as contracts go. So I guess, does anybody have any specific questions, not necessarily about like what to put in a contract, or if you just have a question in general about contracts? We are like willing to go to help in those areas. In
any way that we can legally.
I will say the number one question that we do get is about like how do you keep track of dates? And so this is another like push for a client management software, because it automatically, like once we have a contract signed, it automatically auto-populates into our Google Calendar. That's another reason why it's important to make sure that you have the date right, because if it's the wrong date, it'll auto-populate into your Google Calendar like on a different day, and you will never know. So if you're like me, who lives by your calendar, like that would be really terrible, because I would never know.
Yeah. So also, just unrelated to contracts necessarily, it's always a good idea to follow up with clients and just like double check, like, hey, this is your wedding date, right? Like this day, this time, this place, right. Through an email or something. You can set that up probably automatically in your client management software, but it's always a good idea just to confirm with everyone. Like she said, you don't want to just rely on like your Google Calendar or just rely on like the auto-populated thing. It's good to have like a human respond and be like, yes, that's the correct date, time, and place, so you don't show up at the wrong date, time, or place, which is literally a nightmare. And
anytime an inquiry comes in and I send out, like our welcome email, I literally write out their date, month, like write out the month, write out like the date and the year. Like I write it out word for word from what they put into the inquiry, to again, clarify, like making sure like this is your date. Because like I said, I mean, people have put in their birthday in there by accident. I don't know how that happens, but whatever.
That's just their favorite date. Yeah. Okay, so Brandon says, how long is your contract, and do you think there's a point at which it becomes too long/wordy? So I think it needs to be as long as it needs to be to cover all the different bases. So again, depending on what you're doing. So for weddings, I don't know, how long is it?
I think we have
couple pages.
11. We have 11 pieces to it.
But how many times? They only have to sign it. They initial, what, 3 times and sign once?
Yeah.
I mean, people don't always sign contracts like in their entirety. They don't read them all the way through. We've had sometimes people read through our contract and been like, why is this in here? Why, I'm not signing this because this doesn't protect me. This only protects you or whatever. But at the end of the day, you have to know. That's why it's important to know what's in your contract and know why it's in there, so that you can stand behind it. And you don't want to have stuff that's unnecessary in there, and you want to make sure that it's fair, right? Like, you want to protect the client as well as you, like Ash was saying. You don't want it to be so heavily weighted so it's only protecting you or only protecting them. So I don't think there's necessarily like a perfect length. I wouldn't worry about it being too long, because again, if they want to read it, they're going to read it, and if they don't want to read it, they're not going to read it, and they're just going to sign it. It'd be an interesting poll actually if we asked everybody, all of our brides we've ever had, how many of them actually read the contract. But it's one of those things where as long as you know what's in it and you know that it's protecting you, so if whatever unfortunate event comes up, and again, contracts are only there for when things go bad. So like, as long as everything goes good, you don't really need it. It's just for when things may go south or something happens that you really need it, and it's there to protect you.
I would also say that okay, so like, I don't necessarily think that the length of a contract matters, but I think readability, is that a word? Legibility is what's important.
Sure.
So in the contract shop templates, she specifically says, like, she takes out all the legalese so that, just a common person can read through it and understand what they're agreeing to. I think that's important. I think that's the sign of a great lawyer who's going to, give you something that you can read and that like, what it actually means. And it's not these huge words where you're like, I don't even know what that means. And you're trying to get somebody to sign and agree to it and you don't know what it means. That's a problem. So I don't think length is necessarily like a big deal. I looked at ours. We have 18 bullet points, and none of those are like frivolous. They're all very like pointed to like exactly what it needs to say. Yeah. So I don't think length is the...
But it also needs to be very specific. I mean, that's the thing of any contract, is that you just want to make sure that there's no room for interpretation, and that it's very specific as to what you're doing. But again, that's all these contracts from these different shops that we linked, those will all fit within all these categories.
Yeah. So Morgan said, have you used Shake by Legal Shield? It's free online with an e-signature. We've never used Shake. I've never heard of that before.
I'm sure that it would be fine. I mean, is it free forever? Most of those places, like, they're free for the first couple, and they kind of get you to pay at some point. But if not, then that's great. I mean, that's a great option for sure. Part of the reason for HoneyBook is so great for us is because it adds to our client experience. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. So for us, it's just really important that there's no friction there. So it's really easy for them to just sign and pay the contract, or pay the invoice and sign the contract and do all that stuff. It's just one more step in the like Harrington wedding experience that is a nice, easy thing for them. They don't have to worry about like, oh wow, that was so much easier than I had to mail the contract back to the caterer or whatever. Yeah. That's just one more thing for us. I don't know anything about the Shake by Legal Shield, but I'm sure that I'm sure it's streamlined enough that would be great.
Yeah. Sarah says, do you summarize the points in your contract during client meetings, or do you just let them ask you if they have a question? So I feel like I say this all the time, but Ty and I are not pressure people, so it is very rare that we will pull out the contract during a client meeting,
or even discuss it,
or even talk about it. And a lot of times that's because we rarely meet with a couple in person, because the majority of our clients are like all over the country, and so a lot of our couples are meeting for the first time online in a Google Hangout. So we don't have any way to like show the contract unless we both went to the website, but it has never happened. Like, they have never asked us. We've never had a couple ask to see our contract during a client conversation, because we kind of set the tone saying like, this is our opportunity to kind of get to know you guys, to hear your story, to invest in you, and like all those things. Like, that is what we're talking about. And there are numerous times where I've said, like, we're never going to pressure someone to book us on the spot. I'm not a pressure person. It makes me feel weird. So I would never want somebody else to feel like that. I know that there are people out there who are like, you're going to lose the sale. That's never happened to us. So, we never never pulled out the contract and been like, okay, here it is, and talk through it.
If you ever want to put like a litmus test on the strength of your contract, have a bride who's a lawyer, and that'll really make you think carefully about what
We've
your
had a
contract
couple
says.
of brides or
we had one
grooms.
bride who gave us like a ton of like probably very expensive legal advice because she's like, hey, like this is kind of worded weird and this could be better. This was a
That
long
was
time ago.
before we had
Before
a
we got
lawyer.
our lawyer. Yeah. But she was like, you could probably change this and this is a little a little vague and da da da. So that was kind of funny. But I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. So most people don't ask. Most people have or if they'll be like, I don't understand this thing.
Right.
As long as you can explain it to them, then they're usually like, oh, okay, yeah, totally fine.
Yeah.
We've never had anybody fight us really hard on a contract, have they?
No. We've just had people ask like clarifying questions.
Yeah,
and a lot
which
of
is
times that's
fair.
about like who owns the copyright of our film and
yeah,
like
that's a common.
how they can share. We say in our contract like when you share, like tag us in our business and like if you share it online and stuff like that. So we'll have people ask us specific things like that. Another thing that people ask us a lot is about meals. Like, do you write meals in your contract? Yes. So in our contract,
But we're kind of loosey with the enforcement of that.
yeah,
We're not going to cause a scene.
right. But our contract does say that we require a hot meal for any contract at least 8 hours. At least 8 hours was a big deal to me because 8 hours is a long time. You have to be fed within 8 hours. So that's another question that we get asked a lot is if we have the
Right, but we're not going to sue anybody. It's more just so
No.
that they're like aware of it. But again, a lot of
Yeah.
times people don't read it. And then on the day of the wedding, I'm not going to go over to like the head table and be like, bride,
me?
excuse me. It says here on page 4, section 11 of the contract that we need a hot meal, and they gave me a sandwich. Like, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
But
It's just more so like making people aware. You have to remember too, like for the most part, they're getting married for the first time. And so like they've never planned an event this big. And a lot of times they just don't know.
don't even think about that. It's
Yeah.
not something that crosses their mind. We obviously think about it because we're hungry.
Right.
But it's not gonna
And
cross
we
their
shoot
mind
weddings every
necessarily.
single weekend. Whereas for them, they're getting married one time. And like their friends probably didn't talk about feeding their vendors,
Yeah.
you know? So we try and give a little bit of grace in some areas. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Do we say there's something I was going to say about a point we made earlier about what were your 3 points? Let's summarize your 3 points again, Ash. Go back to the top one. Mod releases. Oh yeah, mod releases are important because you need that so you can share it online. Did we talk about that?
Yeah.
And the model release makes it so that you don't have to get permission from every single guest.
Yeah.
Right.
I talked
Without
about
it having a sign.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just trying to. There was something I was going to say, but I can't remember now. That's okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So so we've answered a lot of contract questions. We still have a few minutes left here. So if anybody has any other types of questions, we can answer some of those. If anybody has any, try and keep them wedding specific, obviously, or like filmmaker specific. But we can kind of open it up now to other questions if people have those out there.
Yeah. I would say, okay, one more thing about contracts. Another question that we get asked a lot as far as like retainer versus deposit.
This is a very heated topic in wedding filmmaking groups.
So, a deposit is ensuring like you are giving a balance over to, for a specific reason. So I had this like long discussion with our lawyer about this because I was like, I don't get it. I don't understand. So retainer is basically they are freeing you up. I'm going to mess this up. Pause. I'm going to pull up my little notes.
Don't mess it up.
Okay.
It is an important distinction, though, especially for what we're doing.
Okay, so a retainer is basically ensuring that, it's saying to your couple, like, this money that you're giving me is earned when it is paid. And that it is like, it's remitted to me in consideration of my experience and my reputation and my skill that I have. And it's also in consideration of any lost business that I can have by taking you on as a client. So the reason why this is important is because in most cases, as a filmmaker, you're not doing any work prior to the wedding day, apart from communication, like emailing back and forth or helping with a timeline or something like this. So retainer, it is very important that you have retainer in your contract and not deposit, because a deposit is like, I'm depositing something and I'm going to get something back. Whereas, that's not happening in filmmaking, but you're retaining, you're giving money to hold a date until the service is completed.
But it's important to have that extra paragraph in there too, because otherwise I think there's legal arguments that can be made if it's not specified in there that they agreed to that.
Right.
That they can, if we haven't performed any of the services, that they can get you can't hold that money or whatever unless it's
right
expressly written. So that's another thing where
Right.
a lawyer would really be able to help you.
and
nail that down.
specifying that the retainer is non-refundable and it's viewed as liquidated damages and not necessarily as a penalty. Like it's not going to be like, oh yeah, you can give it back and stuff like that. So non-refundable retainer.
Right. Mention that to your lawyer when you ask them to
Yes,
help
be
you with
like,
your contract.
tell me about retainer. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's another question that we get a lot.